last lesson, we talked about how Prokofiev usually based his harmony on traditional bass lines with various degrees of chromatic conflict in the upper voices. In some of his other works, we can see Prokofiev experimenting with harmonic norms. Apart from the fact that his harmony is normally more dissonant to traditional tonal harmony, he sometimes tries out something unusual. And because he's a good composer, he follows up on it in a meaningful way. Here's an example from the opening of his fifth piano sonata. Notice how in the second complete bar, at the beginning of the third bar, the bass and soprano are in parallel octaves. Now if this only happened once, it would sound like a mistake. But if you look at the last three bars of the second system, it happens again, approaching an important cadence. And then at the start of the fourth system, the descent from the previous peak is also in parallel motion. Note, however, that the middle voices are not as simple in these parallel sequences. This gives a certain variety. Later in the movement, there are also several phrases doing the same thing, with parallel octaves or fifths between the outer parts. So, essentially, Prokofiev is breaking a classical rule, but using the results in a way that develops consistently. If you look at his seventh piano sonata, we'll again see a kind of experimentation. Normally, tonal basses are doubled at the octave, if at all. Also, alternation between tonic and dominant chords is almost a cliché of tonal harmony. Let's see how Prokofiev plays with these norms. The first phrase is a rather chromatic line, centered on B flat. By the way, beside the considerable chromaticism in this movement, its final cadence is clearly in B-flat major, so it's tonal, but only in the broadest sense of that term. But let's look at some of the harmony within the movement. Here's the start. Notice how at the end of the first system, at the beginning of the second system, the lower parts of the right hand have sort of neighbor note motive. In a more tonal context, the bass would alternate here between B-flat and F, tonic and dominant. Here Prokofiev uses B and F, a tritone, a kind of caricature of the classical formula. Prokofiev's bass lines that mock the classical ones. Another example. Here, what would normally be a dominant pedal is transformed into a cluster, while the upper parts alternate between two keys, G major and B major, instead of staying in B-flat major. Here's what a simple tonal version of the same idea would look like. Right after this, another example. But if we normalize the bass here, alternating F and B flat, this isn't so unusual. Again, if these things happened only once, they would just sound wrong. But since they've become normal here, and since they're used in a way that contributes to the somewhat sarcastic character of this movement, they make musical sense. Prokofiev enjoys experimenting with the conventions of tonal harmony, and he found coherent ways of doing so. Of course, his use of motives, formal development, and so on also contribute to the music's coherence. But this is also true in the classical repertoire. In general, if you want to understand Prokofiev's harmonic style, the best way to do so is to start with the tonal norms he's playing with, to observe how he plays with them, and then to see how he follows up on his experiments.